Today's podcast is brought to you by Quantrix Modeler Introductory Training, teaching the fundamental foundation that you need to become a Quantrix master. Go to quantrixauthority.com to learn more.
Show me how you do Quantrix.
Hey, welcome back to another netcast. I'm Rich Lopez, Quantrix Authority. Sincerely appreciate you joining me today for episode number 198, Row ID Show. I came across this one the other day, and I think it's a best practice, and I want to share it with you. I have here a matrix. It's got a bunch of part codes going down the side, and then it's got a bunch of columns going across the top. Generally, if I were to mention a column across the top like pack size, you could find it pretty easily just because these names are somewhat diverse, and over time you learn where these columns are located within your data set. But if I were to ask you, go ahead and find SKU 14759 on this spreadsheet, or sorry, on this Quantrix matrix, it would take you a little bit of time to go out and find it just because I have a bunch of numbers here. They're certainly not in order, and that's all by design, or that's the way it needs to be. I can't necessarily sort these, so it takes a little bit of time to find the SKU that I'm talking about. And if I were, say I were working with a colleague and we were looking over this data trying to analyze it, I think it takes more time if I say, well, go out and let's look at 14913, look at this and make a comment on it, and then you move on to another SKU like, I don't know, 13753. Again, you have to go out and you have to find it, and it takes a little bit of time. It'd be great if you could just assign a row ID, or you could show the row ID here so that you could say, hey, this is row 5. Look what we have going on with this piece of information, with this SKU found on row 5 or row 6. It'd be a lot easier to find it, right? Well, you could do this in, I guess, two ways. I think there's a best practice way, and then there's another way. But I would go ahead and you could create a new column here. I've got it called metric 44. I'm going to move it over here, and I'd call it row ID. And simply in row ID is I'm going to say row ID is equal to pound part sequence 1. And when I do that, it goes ahead and gives me an ID, and I could say now, SKU or row number 8 has a problem, right? We could talk about that. That's easy to find. Row 5, that's also a problem. Easy to find. Well, if I go ahead and I move this over, if this is a large data set, you can see that my row IDs disappear from me. I would love it if my row IDs would freeze, right? From time to time, you may want to freeze a pane in Quantrix, much like you would freeze it in that lesser program, also known as Excel. Well, they don't have that functionality in Quantrix, but they do have something that's even better, in my opinion, and that is a descriptor. So what I would do is I would simply right-click on part sequence. I would click on descriptor, manage descriptors, and I would go ahead and click new, and I would say row ID. And I'm going to use an expression, and I would call out the matrix that it's in, because this descriptor could be across lots of different matrices. I need to specify when I'm writing the expression what sequence or what matrix it's in. So I'm going to say sequence primary, and I'm going to call it parts sequence 1. And when I do that, bam, sorry, that was incorrect. I overshot the bam. This needs to be a hashtag right here. When I go ahead and I click OK, now it gives me my row ID. So now is the appropriate time to say bam. It gives me my row ID, and it is actually locked like it would be on a freeze pane in that lesser program, also known as Excel. So that's how you would assign a row ID, make it easier for you and your colleagues to work together when you're looking at large data sets, when you're having to do a grid lookup system of columns and rows. I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions about Quantrix, I do hope that you'll reach out to me at quantrixauthority@gmail.com. I absolutely love Quantrix. I want to make you a Quantrix master. I also encourage you to take advantage of the training that I have available at quantrixauthority.com. And please join me again for another episode of Quantrix Authority with Rich Lopez.